Kirklon was always an accident-prone child. Always. Since he was small, he broke his hands about 3 times, Cabot. Broke his hands about 3 times. We had to be taken him to the hospital in the night, something going down in his ears, something in his nose. So he was always accident-prone. But he was a different type of person to the other brothers. He was very sedentary. That is, he would stay by himself a lot. He would read a lot. He would study plants and all sorts of herbs and so on. He went to school in East Dry River, strange enough. We are all Catholics and we grew up in a small Catholic community. But for some reason, he left the Catholic school and asked my father to take him to a primary school in East Dry River. What's the name of the school, Cabot? Bethlehem Boys. And after that, he went to Belmont Secondary. When Kirklon was 18 years, in 1970, and the Black Power Revolution started, our house in El Socorro used to be filled with students. My father was very liberal, and he allowed the conversations and so on. And they were on a campaign to free the soldiers, Rafik Shah and Rex LaSalle and so on, who were arrested and jailed during the 19th century uprising. They formed, right in our house, they formed a group called NORS, National Organization of Revolutionary Students. And they made their placards and so on in our house in El Socorro. And that group became one of the youth organizations of the period and campaigned for the release of the soldiers and activists incarcerated by the then government. He later was involved with NJAC and, among others, campaigned for an end to racism in employment in the banks and in the commercial sectors. They also had a strong program against foreign ownership of the commanding heights of the economy and for national control of the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. And many of the gains we have now, they contributed to those gains, like nationalization of the oil industry, ownership of banks, access to employment in the banks by people of all groups, all cultural groups, and so on. And when the 19th century uprising was subsided, he formed a group, he and others formed a group, Guy Harewood, Brian Jevers, Beverly Jones, Andy Thomas, who himself was a radical newspaper editor, a paper called Boko by James Millett, and a young activist from Faizabad by the name of Michael Lewis. They were among some of the people. There were many of those youths, probably hundreds of those youths, spread throughout Trinidad and Tobago in all areas. And they took a serious decision, one that many of us did not agree with, to remove the government of Trinidad and Tobago by force. And that was a serious decision they took. They called that group the National United Freedom Fighters. And they were massacred. They were literally massacred by the flying squad. Guy Harewood was killed in the St. Joseph River. Beverly Jones was killed. Hilary Valentine was killed. 5 youths were killed in Chewbacca. So many police bullets ran through the house that the house caught on fire. So a lot of those guys were killed, but they never stopped. until about 5 years after, even though there were many pleadings for them to give up and make peace and get some sort of amnesty from the government. During that period, there was virtually a state of war between the government and those young people. They were all young fellas. Some of them were no older than about 24, 25 years. And in 1973, Kirklon was arrested together with Andy Thomas and Michael Lewis. They were arrested by the flying squad. They were detained for an unusual period of time because people were looking, we had hired lawyers to find them and so on. We couldn't find them. And they were charged, convicted, and sentenced to death for the murder of a policeman. During their period of detention, they claimed they were subjected to torture and harsh and oppressive treatment. They spent 14 years in jail. And Ray Samuel, who was involved with Amnesty International, I think, visited, was it in Amnesty?
Vanguard.
The Vanguard newspaper. He was an advocate against capital punishment, and he went to visit them in the prison. And he wrote an article of what Kirklon had told him at that time, of torture, skin disease, and so on, for those 14 years. They were pardoned by President Noor Hassan Ali in 1987. When they came out of prison, many of them came out sick, disoriented, and mentally troubled. I knew Andy Thomas, who eventually joined the Muslimin and was one of the persons who staged the coup. And I knew that he wasn't mentally stable, when I spoke with him, because I knew him before. And Kirklon also was mentally unstable. And Lewis was taken away somewhere in the country and he just disappeared. I never heard of him before. And Elon Harewood is here, right? He can testify, he's the brother of Guy Harewood. So Kirklon took a decision in life that was a very serious decision, which many of us disagreed with it. That is to remove the government by force. But he had that conviction because he thought he was an idealist, an extreme idealist, who thought that he could solve the problems of the world. So the leaders and the activists of the past can testify to the fact that these young men made a very serious sacrifice. Perhaps some may say it was foolish in this period, in that period of our history in Trinidad and Tobago. And they paid a heavy price for it. Kirklon, unfortunately, was improving, I understand, and because I hadn't seen him since Christmas. They said he started to speak to people a bit, and he would go every day for his newspaper because he loved to read, and his favorite magazine was We Beat, the Caribbean Airlines magazine. He loved that. He thought it was one of the best produced magazines in the world, right? And he would ask his siblings to bring it for him when they are coming to Trinidad. So he was improving, right? And he read a lot. He had a lot of books and so on. And he had a lot of papers, So that Kirklon made a contribution that some of us would think was a very unwise decision. But that was his life, that is what he wanted. And that is how I will remember him. So thank you.